review protocol that's projected on the screen, as well as the sample assignments that we're going to use in our breakout.
Thank you, Nadia. Yeah, you'll want these 4 things up as we go through the tool. And I'm going to go ahead and get started and assume that we have a smaller math group, which is what I was expecting, but I'm excited to be among friends with the math folks in our group today. So we have about 20 minutes in this breakout room to go through the math tool. And I want to start by just previewing that it might feel a little bit fast. If you skimmed that tool as part of the pre-work, there's a lot in there. And so 20 minutes is not a ton of time to walk through it and try it out with an example. But the reason we're going to go through it somewhat quickly is to make sure to give you time in small groups on your own to actually dig into the tool yourself and test it out with another assignment, which we'll do after our break. I think people learn better getting to just roll up their sleeves and do it on their own. So we'll go through it pretty quickly on ourselves, but know that you'll get more time in the rest of the session to engage with it. And you'll also have time in our January session to continue engaging with it. So we'll start by just orienting to the tool. Again, we'll walk through and how to use it with that 4th grade assignment. And then I'm going to ask that we hold questions till the end, just because I'm a little nervous to make sure we get through all of it in just our 20 minutes and get through each section of that tool so you see how to use each part. And then whatever time we have remaining at the end, I'll just open it up to questions. But know that when you're in your small groups trying it out on your own, Nadia and I are going to be popping around to the breakout room. So if you have questions and we didn't get time to answer them in the breakout, you can ask them then. So let's first just orient to the tool. And I want to start by talking about the purpose. So this is a tool that you can use when you walk into one of the math classrooms in your school and you look at the task that's been put in front of kids and you want to answer this question: does this task give students the opportunity to meaningfully engage in worthwhile grade level content? This tool provides a really objective and consistent way to measure that in any grade level for math. And before we get any farther, I do want to quickly say that this tool is not meant to communicate that every single task put in front of kids in a math classroom should meet the criteria in this rubric. In fact, we know educators who effectively accelerate learning, they are bringing in just-in-time scaffolding. They are filling in prior grade level gaps when those prior standards are critical to grade level content. But we also know that regular access to really worthwhile, rigorous grade level assignments is critical for students. And so that's what this tool is about. And before we start going through it, I just want to quickly orient to how it's structured. There's 4 sections, and the last section is student performance. We're not going to focus on that section today. That's only relevant if students have done the task, which we do have student work on the samples you were looking at today. But that's just looking at student work and saying, were students able to meet the demands of the task? The first 3 sections are what's looking at the task itself to determine, is this worthwhile? Is it grade level appropriate? And we're just going to focus on those first 3 today. So those are content, looking at the what students are working on, and the practices, looking at how the task is asking students to engage with the content, and finally, relevance. In each of those 3 sections, when you're rating an assignment, you're rating it out of 2 possible points for 6 total points. And what we're looking for is for an assignment to get at least 4 out of those 6 points to be considered grade level appropriate. So let's dig in. You have the tool up in front of you, and we're going to start just with the first section, which is content. Take about a minute or 2 and read just the content section of the rubric on your own. All right, so this section is asking you to do two things. First, you're looking at the task and asking what standards is it targeting? So you have the Nebraska math standards pulled up, and that was probably something you would want to have pulled up when you're using this tool. And you're looking through the standards and saying, which standards does it align to? If you find that the task does not align to grade level standards, then you have your answer. You know that this particular task is not a grade level assignment. If it does align to grade level standards, then what you're really asking is, does it reach the depth of those standards and the instructional shifts? So there's a focus on a few things here when you're looking at depth, and the main one is rigor. And we know that the Nebraska math standards call for conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and application to real world context. So you're looking for all these elements of rigor, but again, really focusing on the language of the standards and ensuring that the items meet the full depth and rigor that's called for in the standards. So let's look now at the fourth grade assignment and look just at this content section of the rubric. So what grade level standards does this assignment focus on? And do all the questions reach the depth of the grade level standards? And if you have an answer, go ahead and put it in the chat. And does anyone here have fourth grade math expertise? I know I talked to some of you in breakout rooms earlier. Looks like everyone's saying no. Great. So I'm seeing one of those standards. Tom, you must be in that standards document. Yeah, and this is, so what I would say here is like, and maybe you all know teachers or instructional leaders at your school, they're so fluent with the standards. They walk into a math classroom. To Nadia's point, the standard might not always be listed on the task, but they look at it and they're able to immediately rattle off like, this is the standard it aligns to. And that's great if you can do that. I would say those folks who are real math experts, a lot of what's in this tool is really intuitive to those people. They've done so much unpacking of the standards. They can like pick up an assignment and say, here's the standard. I know what depth and what rigor it's calling for. And I'm able to really quickly say, like, is it meeting the full depth? Or like, nope, here's where it's missing the mark. And so one of the reasons I think this protocol is so useful is for folks who are building their math expertise or want to be more effective at coaching math teachers and ensuring their assignments are worthwhile and grade level appropriate. It really like walks you through the steps, and that becomes like more and more intuitive the more you do it. So in the interest of time, I'm seeing some of the standards, and I'm just gonna move us along here. So there are 3 standards that it's targeting. So this assignment does target grade level standards. Then we're looking at, does it actually reach the depth of the grade level standards? And this is a tricky assignment to review. And I think we saw that in our poll. So I think most people were saying no, the assignment does not fully reach the depth of grade level standards. But some people were saying yes. And I think this assignment, it's very much on the cusp, which makes it, I think, a tricky assignment to review. Ultimately here, it is focused, so there's not over scaffolding, it's not emphasizing too many skills. Coherence could be stronger, so the first 2 problems and the last 2 problems, there's not really any connections being drawn there. And then it's somewhat meeting these 3 areas of rigor. So this task is asking for procedural skill and fluency, is definitely an area of rigor that's hit by this task, and it's also asking for real world application. This assignment is not asking for conceptual understanding. So that's where I'm putting somewhat for rigor, but what I'm then doing is going back to the language of the standards and really reading the standards and asking myself, what areas of rigor are the standards calling for? And in some of these standards, for example, that middle one, it's really just calling for procedural fluency. So being able to add and subtract those multi-digit numbers. It's that standard itself is not calling for conceptual understanding. So ultimately, while I think this task could ask for conceptual understanding and could meet those areas of rigor better, which we're going to see as we continue to go through the tool, I'm answering that yes, there is sufficient alignment. So the questions are aligning with the expectations as defined by the grade level standards. So let's go now to the next section of the rubric, which is how students are engaging with the content. So take a minute again, just to read this section of the rubric, and you'll see that there's a link in the document here. It's going to link you to the Nebraska math standards. And if you scroll down to page 4 there, those are the Nebraska 4 mathematical processes. And that's what this section is really asking you. Is the task requiring students to engage with these mathematical processes? So you might want to look at both in this time, and I'll give you about 2 minutes just to read through, and then we'll apply it to the 4th grade assignment. All right, so this practices section of the rubric is again asking you to do 2 things. First is just identify whether or not the assignment asks students to engage with at least one of those 4 Nebraska mathematical processes. And then just like before, saying like, okay, if it does target one, is it really reaching the depth called for by that mathematical process and called for by the standard? So taking a look at our 4th grade math assignment again, I'd love to see some of your thoughts in the chat. So is this assignment providing the opportunity for students to engage with at least one of those processes? And if yes, is it really meeting the full depth of that process? Any thoughts here? Are you seeing that this aligns to at least one of those processes? Oh, and it seems like my screen, Nadia, what are you seeing on my screen?
I'm seeing the top row, A through D, content, practices, relevance, and performance, just like that top portion of the tool where we give the first the content rating.
Are you seeing now? What are you seeing?
It seems as though your screen might be frozen, or maybe you're okay. Now I see you.
Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. How about now?
It's just a blank white screen. Are you trying to project the slides? I can probably try and project those for us.
That'd be great. What are you seeing now?
Ah, now I'm seeing the slide deck. Content, what students are working on. So I guess move on to the next.
Great. Sorry about that, all.
It's okay.
And let's see. Okay, so we're seeing Megan chime in, maybe number 1. Yes, I agree. So just in the interest of time, I'll move us ahead. I agree. This assignment is asking students to engage with mathematical process 1. In those last 2 word problems, they need to make sense of the problem. And then throughout this task, they need to compute accurately. So our answer here is yes. The assignment does provide the opportunity for students to engage with at least one of the processes. But then we get into this question about whether or not it's asking students to engage with at least one of those processes at the appropriate level of depth. So when we look at process 1, that includes thinking about the reasonableness of your solution. And questions 4 and 5 don't ask students to do that. They're really just asking them to compute, get the right answer, and they're not really, digging in there in the full depth of that process. And then mathematical process 2, some students did model and represent these problems, although the task is not asking them to. So it's possible we just got like the couple of student work samples that they all did this, or maybe they were taught to do it this way, but the task itself is not requiring students to do that. And when we think about standard 4.11F, which is comparing whole numbers up to 1 million, one of the things that the standard calls for is that students compare numbers using visual representations. And in this task, students are able to just put a symbol there. They're not really required to represent those visually. So this task is not getting to the full depth of those processes as defined by the processes or called for in the standards. So our rating there is not that there's no opportunity at all, but that there's minimal opportunity. So it is allowing students to engage with at least one of those critical math processes, but it could be strengthened and we could be getting to more depth and more rigor there with how students need to engage with those processes. So now let's look at the last section of the rubric, which is relevance. So again, take just a minute or 2 and read only this section. And then if you get time, look back at that 4th grade math assignment and think about how you'd rate it on this section. All right, so this section of the rubric is asking you to do 2 things. First, just determine whether or not the task mostly consists of problems that are relevant to real world contexts, or asking students to really apply critical thinking and are word problems versus just a math task that's like rote computation and not much else. And then it's asking whether or not these are novel problems? Is there more than one solution pathway? Is this going to lead to rich mathematical discussion? Can student, do they really have to persevere and problem solve and reason through solving the problems, or can they just solve them all the same way? So I'd love to get some thoughts on how you think our fourth grade math assignment stacks up.
So you want that in the chat, or you just want us to talk it out?
If you, go ahead and share if you
Okay.
have a thought, or in the chat.
I don't know. To me, it seemed like I think we were in the same group before. I was kind of thinking like this might be the case. So it's like it appears that it's just really looking for the Sam is just really kind of looking for, can you do multi-step addition and then subtract by the whole group? So it's like, is that really looking for different responses, or another way to think about it? It's just looking for one answer. Whether they show their work in different ways or not doesn't really matter in the worksheet, I guess. But yeah, and like you said, the top half of the worksheet was, I thought it did a good job of comparing, but just probably not modeling. So, yeah, I think it's probably just like a solid one. Like it's almost there, but it's not really quite there.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with all these points, Matt. So when we look at this one, and again, I think this is a tricky assignment to review. This one's more on the cusp, but it doesn't mostly consist of word problems or real world application. And because of that, then our answer to this next, just the way the tool works, if it's not mostly word problems, then when we look at C2, we're saying, well, if yes, are these problems asking students to apply math in a meaningful way? Because our answer was no to C1, then our answer defaults to no in C2. I would say, when we look at those word problems, if we were evaluating them, that first one about sports tickets could be relevant to students. The one about number of employees could maybe be more relevant. And then when we get into this third section, just like Matt said, these word problems are, and the other problems are pretty straightforward. They're not likely to result in different types of solutions, and they're not asking students to.
You're going to find it because I think they took it out. I was going to say, I think that was something that was not in these new ones, was sequence anymore. So I don't find it. Describe characters, recount the narrative. That's the only thing I maybe
What is recount? I think that's probably about right.
Yeah, recount.
But are we finding the message, the lesson, or the moral?
No.
But you are recounting, so it just makes it a 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Recount.
there you go.
Recount narratives and determine there. So whatever those are, you have to determine their central mess. So if they did this, but then said, what's the
Yeah, so I'm looking at first grade standards, and it looks like central ideas and details. Their standards are retell the familiar stories, including key details to understand the lesson or message in the text, along with identifying characters, the setting, and events in order to draw on those details. So those are first grade standards.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, so on the protocol, is this assignment based on one or more texts? The answer would be yes.
Yes.
And the title is Bear and Turtle, something, something, something.
Right.
Bear and Turtle and the Great Lake Race. Okay. Are the texts aligned, high quality, aligned, and grade appropriate? It's hard to tell though, because we don't see the text at all. Like all we see is the cover and then the sequence of events. So are those events directly extracted, or are they summarized of what happened? That would be my question.
I think that it looks like they're directly pulled from.
So, oops, mine went back to English.
Oh, that's right. I'm in the ELA standards. Let me find that link again.
Are you all looking at math?
Yeah,
Yep. I'm
All
trying to
right.
find the math standards.
6th grade math.
Do you need the link?
I
Mine
know
keeps pulling up English.
Let me get the link. I'm just popping around looking for any math groups. So far, every group I've been in is ELA, so I'm excited you guys are doing math. And I'll pop back once you've had a chance to see if you have questions. But let me find that link for you.
Oh, I think it's in the document.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I don't really see that it's aligned to a standard.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Not bad.
I'm just
Not bad at
popping
all.
around to rooms looking for any groups focused on math to see if there are questions.
No, I'm just looking at 6th grade math with strawberries and the range, median, and calculating the mean and that kind of stuff. You know, it just, to me, unfortunately, just procedural math. You know, I mean, they're not looking at concepts. They just want to see if they know how to calculate and do these things. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no real instruction. I think there's, depending on how this was taught prior to this is more like almost like a formative or summative assessment to me. And to say, hey, here, do not do this or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and really just can they do it from the like you're saying, from the procedural fluency? Like, do you know the algorithm? Not really checking like, do you understand why it's relevant or what it means?
Yeah. So when I was using the tool, I mean, it looks as if like the very first two things in A1, A2, you know, it's a 6th grade standard, 6.42. It does have like, you know, allow students to focus, avoiding over scalping, all that stuff. I feel that's in there, but I just feel the mathematical practices, it does target grade level content. Like I say, just more or less, once again, just look at procedural stuff and not the actual teaching and understanding mathematics.
Yeah.
Because look at good instruction. How do I know what you're thinking? Now, this particular kid did some very explicit math. I can kind of see what they're thinking. But once again, why are they learning this? How can they tie this to real life situations? You know, how can we make this really relevant to what they're learning today? I think that's the piece that's missing. But all the basics of lesson planning, that this is just like to me, summative assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even then, to your point, like, it wouldn't give teachers data on like, have they really met this standard? Because the standard does call for them to be able to compute these things, but also in the standard itself asks, can they interpret them? And so I think if this were a teacher's like summative, you wouldn't really know, the kids just like memorize how to do the mean, or did I actually teach them like what is the mean?
Yeah.
Which for data, you know, that's really the whole point. Like,
right.
Who cares what the mean is unless you know what it means, you know?
Right. Even if they were to create their own problems and have other students solve these problems, or because you want to demonstrate their understanding of, you know, how to do these specific things, and identify which scenario they would use these specific skills in real life. Hey, I'm planning a birthday party, and I want to invite my friends from 4th grade through 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever. That's a pretty big range. What kind of activities can I, design for that range of kids or that range of ages? And I think we could be really creative with this to help support learning of students.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I was just looking for the, I was gonna give you the link to the answer key. But your assessment seems totally spot on. And if you want to look at the, the 5th grade one isn't so far off from middle school standards. So if you want to look at another one that might be a little different, you could look at the 5th grade in our last 5 minutes. And we'll be sharing out for whatever reason, I'm not seeing the link here to the key. But we'll be sharing that at the end.
Okay. I think I should remember this problem.
Funny. Yeah, it's a good one. All right, I'm gonna pop into the other middle school room that's doing math and just see if they have any questions.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
I mean, it talks about, if we're going on to C, then it talks about real world. I mean, you're talking about, I guess, strawberries part of it. I don't know if you would count strawberries. I don't know.
They look like dots.
Yeah.
Have you seen that commercial on TV where the teacher has the potatoes on her desk? She says she's teaching like a little one, and she says, I have 6 potatoes and I take 2 away. How many do I have left? And the kid says, I don't like potatoes. That's why I don't teach elementary up to middle school.
Seen one with like corn and stuff. Like, why would I want that much corn? Like,
right.
Why would we go to the store and get that much? Like, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, there's definitely no word problem with this. Like, hey, Jeannie is going to the grocery store, or or picking strawberries. Like, and obviously maybe it's lower level, but there's no like real world. The only real world I would say in this is it says strawberries, which
right. That's what I think too. I don't think it does, just because, like you said, just because they say that doesn't mean they're saying this is how you would use this, or
Does that mean then that the critical thinking is out too then?
Well, that's that kind of thing. I mean, so if you're saying no to the C1, then C2 is obviously no.
Yeah.
And then
what did you all rate it for content?
You said a 2.
2.
And that was just based off looking at the standards. I mean, not like she said, not having any context to what's been taught or done prior to this. So if you look at the standards, it meets, I mean, it's so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I looked at the, I'll send you guys a link to a completed rubric. I think I rated it as a 1 because the standard about mean, median, mode, and range is like specifically asking, can students interpret them, not just find them? And in this task, I feel like it's getting at the procedural fluency. Can they do the algorithm to find these things, but not at all getting at like, do they actually understand what these things mean and can they interpret them? I thought about that when Lucas was talking about when you guys were down in the 3rd section and just talking about how the problems are so straightforward. Made me wonder what you rated those earlier ones. what's your kind of like overall thoughts on this assignment? Did you have I was just in another middle school